Talk show. Recorded live.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you are listening to the VMware Communities Roundtable podcast. This is podcast number 595. My name is Eric Nilsson, and with me today I have no co-hosts because Corey Romero is off doing vExpert licenses today, and Matt is visiting customer sites. So I am here. Today is March 9th, 2022. And on the show today, we're going to have Ryan Kelly. He's a VMware Cloud Solutions Architect. I think works out of the Americas region. We're going to be talking about 5 ways to avoid container lock-in. So excited about that, Ryan. But before we get to you, Ryan, I'll just do a little bit of news here just to talk a little bit about what's coming up for VMworld. We don't have any vExpert news. I know the subgroups have been kicked off, so you should be working. If you are in the vExpert program and you want to be part of a subgroup, this is your time to join the subgroups. That's going on. VMworld, we're going to have some major announcements come mid-April. We're excited about that. Can't tell you what they are yet, but I can tell you that they're going to be announcing that. They're going to be announcing, what's happening. Excited about that. I'm excited about the whole, in presence this year because we're starting to plan. We're going to be doing a community booth and a theater for V Brown Bag and Code. So we'll have, if you've been to VMworlds in previous years, we're going to have a very similar setup. So we are investing the money to make sure the show is good. We're expecting maybe 2/3 the audience that we normally get because, there is a pandemic tailing off. So it's not going to be full force, but we are planning all the standard stuff that we do. So we're excited about that. And then we are going to be doing simultaneous live streams of, I think, maybe a couple hundred sessions at the same time. So I know that's going to be happening. So if you can't make it to VMworld, you'll still be able to, watch keynotes. And then I think there are going to be several hundred sessions that are going to be pre-recorded like we did during the pandemic. So that's good. If you are coming, we're going to have the community booth, the vExpert, the blogger tables, the expert party, thank you gift, hackathon. So all the things, the fun things that we do. I'm still debating on whether we do any kind of Raspberry Pi lab. I'd like to do a lab with William Lamb on running ESX on Raspberry Pis and then running the payloads on top of them. So I've talked to William about that in previous years, but then obviously we had the pandemic, so we didn't do it. So we might do that. So we might have some Raspberry Pi lab stuff going on at the same time. We are going to have the booth, the community and code all together. A few years ago, we separated them where we had the code booth and code labs over in Moscone West, I think it was, and then the community booth downstairs in the pavilion in Moscone South. It's going to be in San Francisco for US, and in Europe, same kind of thing. It's going to run 4 days. We're excited about that. I think in Europe, the hang space is open for 3 days, so we'll be there 3 days. And that's it's all being planned, and we're allocating budgets and looking forward to getting a chance to seeing everybody in person if you can make it. So excited about that. I think that summarizes what we got going on in news. Is just basically we're doing a lot of VMworld stuff, and Corey's wrapping up the licenses for vExperts. And with that, let's go chat with Ryan and get to our topic, which is VMware Cloud. It is 5 ways to avoid container lock-in with Ryan Kelly, VMware Cloud Solutions Architect. Ryan, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Good, thanks, Eric. How you doing?
I'm doing great. So we always start out with a community podcast because we're a community. We like to learn about people we have on the show, and I think you're a blogger too and a vExpert. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got here in your career, what's your career arc look like, and then we'll get into the topic.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm currently a staff solution architect. I focus primarily on VMware Cloud and AWS, but we've also incorporated a lot of the new Kubernetes features into that stack. So I've sort of transitioned into more modern apps development and working with those types of customers and use cases. But my history goes back almost, I've been in the IT industry going on about over 20 years now. And I started my career down a little bit different path than traditional college. So back in the day, it was I was actually showing my age here. I was a Novell CNE. I went to a tech school, and at the time, that was the fastest path because there were not a lot of trained folks in Microsoft and Novell technology. And then quickly, Microsoft MCSE became the standard. And then I got my first role as a desktop support, and then later on systems engineer. And so my background coming into VMware was as a customer, and I've held that tradition a lot with talking to customers as well as interacting with the various engineering and business groups within VMware to take what I learned as a customer and what I like to see out of the products and really be that voice of the customer to interface with those folks. I did also go to traditional college. My previous employer was gracious enough to fund a lot of that, and so I took those skills to the next level, and then sort of graduated to VMware just out of mostly love for the technology. And here I am 10 years later. And I started my blog really, it wasn't like to be cool and have a blog. It was more, I would get asked a lot of the same questions over and over, and I found myself typing out that type of email, constantly. And what I figured out is, hey, this knowledge or this use case or whatever guide or how-to guide would probably apply to more than just my customer. And so I started to publish that externally, and I started to see that it had a lot of benefit to customers that maybe are not based in the US, Europe, APJ, those kinds of things. So
yeah, it's a very common career arc, right? Like a lot of people, end up falling in love with the technology, getting a job early on in their career with the technology, and then graduating to new technologies. I have to smile at Novell, right? Like several of us have, spent time there. Graham on chat says Novell rules, right? It's like we've all come through that scenario. And then eventually a lot of people that end up at VMware, work at customers. Like we pick up a lot of people that work at customers. It's like the easiest way to get a job at VMware. People ask me, how can I get into VMware? I'm like, go work at a customer site, right? That uses VMware, use it, because sooner or later you'll get to know everybody, and then sooner or later you'll find a job here, right? That you like because of the passion. And then your blogging is also very common. So many people, I think 99% of the people that do blogs, it's all just because so many people were pestering them to tell them how to do something that they just eventually go, I'm just going to write this up and point you over here so that you can just go read it, as opposed to pestering me. And then, and it's a way to share. So yeah, very, very common. And it's a, that's kind of the way I think VMware operates its communities and the whole thing. So that's cool. Yeah. Very nice. So we should do a shout out to your blog. Your blog is VM2Cloud, vm2cloud.com, right?
Yep, going on. It's just had our anniversary of 10 years, and it's amazing because it feels like I just started that yesterday, and it's been like 5 minutes, but it's very rewarding because it is a labor of love. There's time I spend on that, creating those blog posts that usually occurs after my daily work hours, but it's very rewarding because I see the traction it gets. I see the comments, the positive comments of, hey, I was working on this, we were stuck at this point, you saved the day, those kinds of things. That's the kind of feedback that keeps me going to keep on blogging.
Yeah, it's a funny thing because my water heater started leaking last weekend, Saturday, right? And there was drip, 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 drip. I'm like, oh, and it was dripping into a place I didn't want it to be dripping anyway. And so I was like, okay. And I Googled it, and somebody had done a nice blog on, how to replace your thermostat if it's leaking, right? And then had nice pictures and took you through the whole steps. And like, I saved like a ton of time because he had what to buy, that I piped up to use. And like within an hour, I did the whole project, because that guy had written the perfect blog for exactly what I needed. I did it step by step and, finished it up, and I was like done. And I was like, 2 hours later, an emergency turned into like I feel proud that I fixed something. So I commented on the guy's blog, told him, hey, it was a Saturday night at 8 p.m. and, I was able to have everything fixed by 10, right? So it's a give back kind of thing, right? And it just saves people because you've been through it, you've talked people through, you write the article, and somebody that's coming up behind has the same thing, and you save them a bunch of time. So yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, and I've been in the trenches too. Like I said, I've been a customer, and I've been there where you're stuck, and it was like if I just had one screenshot or some sort of tribal knowledge around how other folks got around this. So that's what I try and do is like when I come across something internally and I see like, you know what, people are probably gonna get stuck there, then I put a blog out for it. And then I just also try and share some industry knowledge as well, because I've got a lot of experience with a lot of different customers, and I wanted to share like what best practices are, what folks in the industry are doing, because that's a knowledge you don't really get from like marketing type of blogs or interfaces.
Yeah, and I work in marketing, and I tell my marketing cohorts when they say, "Oh, what should we do?" I'm like, you know what? None of us in this building, Hilltop E in Palo Alto, know what to do, because none of us run data centers, right? Like I used to run a data center before I came to VMware. I was a vice president of operations for a company, but I worked my way up to get that position. It was like $100 million company through IT, right? I started in IT, ran Linux machines and SCO, Unix. Everybody knows that. It was Unix, not Linux. But you learn how to do things through that process, and then you can share it as you grow through your career. Your blog, I see you blog VMW on AWS, vRealize, Icon Pack. You have, a couple topics, but clearly your job is cloud stuff. So you're spending some time writing about the cloud stuff, right? Let's talk about 5 ways to avoid container lock-in. So
Sure.
container lock-in, why don't we talk about the, like what our customers are going through? Because you work customer facing, right? So what are customers going through as they start to adopt containers and Kubernetes, and what was the problem set that made you write this article?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess going back early on when I first saw Docker sort of come onto the space, I saw that a lot of similarities to what VMware did, and there was a lot of uh, advantages and techniques that they were using to make the whole development lifecycle easier. And so the big advantage I saw is VMware made it agnostic for using any hardware, gave you that freedom to just move between different hardware, to move the VMs between them, that no sort of Hotel California type approach. And then I saw as containers evolved, these markets started to evolve and innovate, and then there started to be Kubernetes came into the picture as well, and it started to see I started to see an erosion of sort of this freedom of being able to have that portability, and this whole notion of infrastructure as code is to really drive that freedom of being able to have everything in code and not depend on that infrastructure. And then when I saw services pop up on these cloud providers like EKS and Azure Container Service, they're very cool and they're very easy to enter and exit in. But the challenge is they have proprietary features built into them that I think get people stuck eventually. So I want to just put out there like, hey, there's some things you can do to be able to avoid those lock-ins, so you're not getting tied to a certain vendor, and then you'll still have that freedom to pick and choose where you want your containers to run.
Yeah, I think it's certainly Ragu's direction this year to promote the idea of multi-cloud services, right, and being able to have a layer that goes across all clouds and helps you not be locked into any one, or being able to run cloud payloads across all of them simultaneously, right? So less about lock-in and more about just being able to selectively choose and then be able to migrate the workload across depending on pricing and feature availability or whatever. So it's kind of a both, but it's like having that cloud layer be there, right, which is our multi-cloud services, then being able to have the layers above that not lock you in, right? So if you are using Active Directory or whatever the registry is container registry, that you're not getting yourself locked into a container registry that's only on one platform, because then how do you move your workloads around, right? So interesting.
Exactly. And what I've seen recently with, there's some, if you've used containers like pushed and pulled images from Docker Hub lately, you'll notice there is this new rate limit. So, if you're using the free version, it's only 100 downloads. And if the problem is that, like, companies that I've talked to, they're all coming from the same IP address. So that's going to be quickly exhausted. And then there's, other services, container registries that have popped up on Amazon and other vendors. The challenge is like the code and the techniques they use to push and pull those are specific to those environments. So the nice thing about the Harbor registry, it's open source. You can download and install it today, and then you can run it in any cloud that you want or on-prem. And it has replication, so you can replicate all the images to and from. But that way, you're using the same registry across all, and without that rate limitation. So it's kind of addressing two problems, with the lock-in, but also with not having to pay a huge fee if you go over those certain limitations. And pretty much any customer that is doing real DevOps every day, like spinning up and tearing down containers, you're going to quickly reach that rate limit. It's just a matter of time. So
I had not heard that they had limits on the services themselves, and they're charging. I hate that, right? Like, get you in trouble. Right? Yeah, hadn't heard that. So okay, so then there are these issues. So you wrote a blog article and you have 5 ways to avoid container lock-in. Why don't we just go through each one of those for fun right now?
Okay. Yeah. So I think we touched on the using your own registry. I think that makes sense. And Harbor's free to download, so I encourage everyone to just download and try it.
And that's our open source registry, right?
Correct.
Yep. For people that haven't paid attention.
And then the other one is to use a standard multi-cloud management tool. So instead of relying on tools that are provided by the particular vendor, I recommend just using something that's SaaS-based and is able to manage a Kubernetes install virtually anywhere. So the solution we have, Tanzu Mission Control, it's agent-based. So it just needs an agent on that particular Kubernetes cluster, as it just runs as a container. And then it basically phones home to this service. So you don't need any like special firewall or VPN connections, but you can manage that installation from anywhere. So if you've got Kubernetes deployed out on Amazon, out on Azure, in a garage somewhere in Palo Alto, a data center in Singapore, it can all be in that same view. And then all the RBAC and the writes and the upgrades and the lifecycle management is all in one place. So it's a really nice solution. And in my opinion, it's the vCenter for container and Kubernetes management. I think we at VMware, we need to do like a better job explaining that to people. And that's what I'm working on too, is just bringing that message home. Because when I saw it, I was like, this is what I would buy. And for me, that's easy to help my customers with, is I would buy this. So it's easy for me to help them understand it.
That's an interesting way of putting it, and a lot of people don't really pay attention to the name Mission Control, right? Like, so
Yeah.
it's like it's almost like I want to have multi-cloud vCenter, right? Like because it's easy to grok, but that's a multi-cloud management tool. I gotta ask, like, in your experiencing customers, are customers starting to look at this as an important way to manage their infrastructure?
I think it's coming around. So I think what I've seen happen is a lot of customers have gone down the path of roll their own Kubernetes and quickly found out how difficult that is to do. And I can give you a perfect example. Is one of the blog posts I wrote a long time ago was to a Kubernetes service for vRealize automation. And I had this idea that it would be cool to click a button and install it. what I didn't realize is how much work it took to actually install Kubernetes. And it took me over 2 weeks just to get the install down. And now with the solutions we provide, it's literally down on VMware Cloud and AWS. It's literally down to push button, 10 minutes, it's installed. And so I think it's coming around where a lot of our customer base is seeing the Kubernetes environments grew that were homegrown in their environment, and they need a way to have IT actually manage that. And so we're seeing a lot of traction with customers who are inheriting those types of environments, and they like what they're seeing with like mission control and the Harbor registry, and then the built-in Tanzu for vSphere. People are really starting to see the like, okay, VMware really got this right, and it's the same skill set that a vSphere admin has. So if you've been using vSphere for a year or 20 years, you already know how to do this. That's what we're finding.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good that people are starting to come around it. I think we got to. Yeah, I think that's Raghu's mission this year is to kind of make sure that everybody gets this message, gets the true multi-cloud services. So mission control, good one. Use persistent volume claims. I don't know what that is. I've never even heard of that. Take me through that.
Sure. So originally containers were meant to be immutable. So they were just disposable run times for like a web front end or some sort of database. However, as we started to move more and more applications from like a VM format to a container, there is this notion of persistent data. So there's data that's going to live there forever, or is going to, as part of the DevOps cycle, may get attached and detached to certain volumes. And so that data that is written traditionally to some sort of volume. And what some of the cloud providers have gone with is more of a persistent disk type of situation where they're writing to a disk volume, then you have to format it. So think like, Windows or Linux, you have to actually format like a D drive.
Right.
What we've done on vSphere is we moved to a persistent volume. So it's completely agnostic of the underlying infrastructure. So underneath that, it may be vSAN or iSCSI, it doesn't matter. But we've at least abstracted away that complexity. And then that's universal to any Kubernetes installation. So even if you were not using like a VMware distribution of Kubernetes, this would be the same. So all the developers' infrastructure as code, it would work the same across both. But if you use persistent disk, you have to write it a certain way for Google, a certain way for Azure, and a certain way for Amazon. That's where you get into those lock-in situations.
Makes sense. I get that. I didn't pay attention to claim like when I saw that persistent volumes, but I didn't know they were claims. So you claim a volume, and that's the name that they use for that, I guess. Right. So.
Correct. Yeah. Just the way that the claim is done is it's universal with a persistent volume, and it's specific to the cloud provider for a persistent disk.
Right. Deploy your own Kubernetes cluster. I guess that's just like deploy your own cluster, so you can then have nodes or worker nodes throughout. Take me through that.
Yeah. So what VMware is providing is Kubernetes industry standard deployments. So there's nothing proprietary about it. It's all straight up Kubernetes that you could download online. We just make it easy. We have a packager and a deployment automation tool to actually push those out. So what we're saying is instead of going to a cloud provider that is a managed Kubernetes service that's going to have certain cadence on when they're actually going to release different versions of the Kubernetes, and they may have proprietary mechanisms within those environments. What we're saying is that if you're going to run your containers this way, just go ahead and deploy your own Kubernetes cluster, whether that be on vSphere or public cloud. And that way you're consistent across all your environments. And plus, no matter which cloud you're on, so going back to that multi-cloud story, you're using the same code and the same mechanism, same APIs, and same what they call in Kubernetes a CRUD command. It's the same exact across all of them. So instead of writing your code specific for each cloud, you would have the same code that's universal to any cloud.
Yeah, that makes sense. Right. Yeah, yeah. And this is where Tanzu comes in, or even Tanzu Community Edition, right? Like you can get your own Tanzu, put it in each of the clouds, and now you've got the same exact Kubernetes across all your clouds, right? So
Exactly. And that, I don't know if anyone's even downloaded or tried the community edition, but I love it. It's just so simple. Like finally there's a package that is just click and deploy. So it points to vSphere, Amazon, whatever cloud you want, deploys Kubernetes for you. You can add clusters, do lifecycle. It's really
what
cool. It's really
what
well
fun
done.
is that? That just makes it too easy, right? Like then
Yeah,
part of the fun is having it not work 30 times in a row until you finally find the magic way that some document says to do it. But
yeah, it's definitely going to put me out of work on the blog how-to guides because there's not much for me to write. There's 2 lines: download, click, vSphere, install. That's it. So
yeah, right, yeah. I mean, then you got all the stuff on top, right? You still have to run you have to run it, and things go wrong. There's still work that has to be done. I don't think we're gonna be out of work anytime soon, right? I
oh
think
no,
this actually, Kubernetes actually, and managing the pods and managing the applications running, it's actually it's a bigger task, right? I think there's more to do than there was before, but you're managing more of the stack now, right? And the stack has got more complicated, but it
yeah,
scales, right? It scales bigger, so but there is a bit more work to it, right? Like I think it's more work. It's nice the community edition exists. It's nice that we got this ability for everybody to just go click. We put together a 12 days of Kubernetes, and over the holidays, so we give you a lab you could do every day, or a task you could do every day. And midway through, we told you to go get the communities edition and go get it installed, and then we gave you a couple other things to do, so that you have a home lab. So yeah, it can be done. So makes sense. In your day-to-day job, I wanted to do this before we get to the last one. Like,
sure.
what are you doing in your day-to-day job? Are you advising customers, or are you architecting solutions? The reason I ask is, like, when customers need to start heading down this path, what's the on-ramp for customers to start learning this and engaging? Does VMware offer professional services for it? What does a typical customer do when they want to start architecting out their multi-cloud solution with containers and Kubernetes?
Yeah, so a lot of what I'm doing daily now is, a lot of listening, just trying to understand, what their challenges are and where we can add value and help. And then, like you said, it is a journey, so we don't expect everyone just to pick this up overnight. Because Kubernetes it's a different mindset. There are a lot of similarities to vSphere, the way the management of the pods and the clusters and the scheduler work, but this is a very much developer command line focused solution. So what I've been really guiding a lot of our core champions at our customers at is, starting with the basics of where I started. Deploy your first container, build a container. So just start with Docker and kind of understand the workflows that the developers are going through, and then start to build out like a download community edition. Just load a simple Kubernetes cluster and just start exploring it and start playing around with it. Maybe partner with a developer who's hungry for resources too. So you've got some developers that are like, hey, we need this environment just to test around with. Partner with them so you can understand both sides of the story, because this isn't just an infrastructure type of problem. It's also developers that want very fast speed and low friction with IT to actually get their job done. So what we've tried to do a lot with customers is really bring in those developers into the conversation so that we can understand, their requirements, what they're asking for, and then really position what VMware can do in that space. Another really useful resource is the hands-on labs. So VMware's hands-on labs, there's a ton of labs around Tanzu, both from both sides. So there's a lot of labs around standing up the Kubernetes infrastructure and administering that. But then you could also put on a different hat and wear the shoes of the developer and then experience how they would see, pushing and pulling images, building an application, building a multi-tiered app on this infrastructure. I think that's helpful. That was always helpful for me, is like, why do you even want this? I get like Kubernetes is this buzzword, but why do these developers want it? Once you understand both sides, then you can better address like what you can do infrastructure wise. And then also like I think the incentive we're trying to really focus on with a lot of our customers is this is a huge resume builder too. So it's not just about, addressing this new problem or concern, but also you're learning new skills. I've always been all about following the next big thing or the next shiny penny. And I've sort of built my career on that, of trying to find what's the next thing or the next innovation in the industry. So I think there's a lot of advantage and incentive for or motivation for our customers to learn this, because you'll see as you start to add these skills or accreditations or any type of certification you get, you'll see your LinkedIn will start to light up. Not that we're encouraging anyone to leave any customer or company, but I'm happy here at VMware. But I have noticed as I've started to blog and really dig into some of these technologies, I see my LinkedIn just start to light up, where I was like, I would have never been offered those types of roles before, but as I'm graduating into these new technologies, you see there's more opportunity out there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And certainly if you have developed those skills, you're in a better position even in your own company to be able to, help make a decision to go that route, right? Like if you're thinking multi-cloud or you're thinking how to do it, if you have those skills, even though you haven't really done any projects yet, that puts you in a better position to be able to talk about it and help drive the conversation at your company on where to go, right, and what to do.
Yeah, good point. I forgot to mention just even internal promotion. It's a great opportunity if you're looking to move up and just find that extracurricular activity that's going to get you that next level at your organization. This is the way to go.
Yeah, and I think most of us, we all have home labs. We all have areas inside of our company where I've got servers spun up doing things. And sometimes I used to go just show upper management, like, this is what I've got running. I've built this and this is how it works, right? And it's just being able to propagate, this, this technology through your enterprise. If you have an instance of it, VCDX 181, the guy, I forget his name already, but I just know him as VCDX 181. He has a home lab that he's running all of it, and they use it as a demo center throughout Europe, right? Because he's got just a massive lab, and he just did on this on his own because he wanted to learn it. But then it is actually, they use it to show, in his day-to-day practice, how this stuff works, right? And he's used that to then get consulting gigs throughout Europe and help his company. His company, I think, is a consulting company as well, so he does that as well. So it's good all the way around. And it's kind of weird because for me, everybody's at different points in the journey. Some people aren't moving at all. They're just traditional data center vSphere. Their apps aren't changing. And then you've got others that are looking to change, and then there's others that are already changing on different clouds, and they're trying to aggregate clouds up into one kind of architecture across multiple clouds or across divisions in the group. So yeah, there's a lot of different places that you can use this knowledge when you get it.
Yeah, actually you just reminded me of a great story about showcasing new technology. So this is going way back, but back in the day, I was working for a company. I was at Bayer Corporation, the aspirin company, and we were at a tech conference for Citrix, and they were using some technology to do multiple VMs on one machine. So I actually brought in this showcase, and I'll show you the box just to prove it. I bought on my own credit card
There it is. Yeah.
ESX server. And I took a gamble. I was like, hey, I think this is going to change the world. And I brought it in. I installed it on some old hardware. I started showing people. I got some some people that were hungry for extra capacity, and it sort of skyrocketed from there. So good point, Erica, bringing that up.
I think we've all done that. My SCO Unix was that way, where I back in the day an IBM AT I had gotten a hold of, and kind of wanted to have my own root password. I was always on university systems, and I never had root passwords because I wasn't on the lab staff or anything like that. And so when I started working at IBM, I started working at IBM in software, but I bought an IBM AT at the time. I think it was 6.8 megahertz or something like that was the CPU speed. But you could buy this SCO Unix, and it was like $1,200. And back in, I think this was 88 or something like that. It was, still money for me out of college, but I bought it because I wanted to have my own root password, right? And then I got my own root password, and started doing stuff with it. Showed people, joined a club. The next thing you know, that's where my career went, right? Because you just find something that's cool, and you go, I can run a multi-user operating system on one of these little, $2,000 machines that I can get from IBM. And this is like super cool, because before that at university, a deck was $50,000, right? To get a multi-user Unix login system that you could use, CP to the university, and get email feeds, ARPANET feed, I think it was. I got there was you couldn't do that. So it is fun to get the technology. So it's cool to see your box. For those of you who are listening to this podcast, he showed us an ESX, I think it was, ESX server VMware, which that must have been, is that 3 dot? What version is that? Like 3 dot?
I think it's 3.0.
Yeah, 3 dot. That's the one I started with.
1 or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep, 3.1. We weren't calling it vSphere yet. We were just still calling it ESX.
It's like mainframe class. We were using mainframe as our
mainframe class virtual machines. Nice. That's because everybody that at the time, virtual machines were all just for mainframe, right? That was, everybody knew virtual machines from mainframe. So it's kind of like the same with SCO Unix, where here we got this virtual environment you could put on x86 hardware and have a whole virtual machine environment, which was classically for like $500,000 machines, that you could do that on. So
yeah, it worked though. I mean, the marketing worked because most of my company was still mainframe, and so that connection actually really resonated with a lot of folks that are like, oh, like a slice or a VM slice. And unfortunately we could never get rid of that VM slice scenario, but we were very successful with VMware. And then, I pretty much installed every product VMware had, and then I graduated to VMware. So
that's right. That was fun times. Getting back to your article here, your last of the 5 things that you should do, and let's review: private registry, 1 private registry, 2 standard multi-cloud management tool, 3 persistent volume claims, 4 deploy on your own Kubernetes clusters, and drumroll number 5, bring your own backup solution. People forget about that, but if you lock yourself into a backup solution for the cloud vendor, then if you want to move to a different cloud or be mobile, you got to deal with a whole other backup system somewhere else, right? So
exactly. And again, going back to containers should be immutable, the reality is a lot of customers that are heavily standardized on containers, there's going to be some systems that are, they have code that's specifically written for that container, or there's data that's going to be unique that can't be duplicated. So I encourage folks to just like with your infrastructure is, have a backup that's agnostic to that infrastructure. Otherwise, you're stuck there. So if you back up to something like AWS, it doesn't mean you can't use their infrastructure to do the backup. But if you're locked into that and then you go and switch to another cloud provider, then how are you going to do the restore, in the event of a disaster? This way, you've got something that's universal across all of those. You can just replicate the data over, and that backup tool continues to operate.
Yeah. Are we still, what do people use these days? Is Veeam still the thing to use? Or, I know VMware has some backup capability. I don't know what the multi-cloud backup solution really is these days. I don't know.
So for VM wise, I see a lot of Veeam. I see a lot of Cohesity. You know, there's a lot of, if customers standardize on network appliance filers, I see like an ONTAP on cloud type of SnapMirror replication going on. But I think the space is still sort of evolving. I think there's still a lot of innovation that could occur with something that's more cloud agnostic. But on containers specifically, the open source tool that Valero that VMware acquired is it's pretty much become the de facto, even outside of VMware. So
Interesting.
customers who are straight up Kubernetes, they use that because it's open source. And then what's cool now is we built it into that Tanzu mission control as just a native feature. So you don't have to know all the, you know, how to build from GitHub and get the thing installed. It's just there as a button, backup container, and you're done.
Yeah, Valero. I knew that. I had heard of that one. Right. I think they had the Valero folks in when we first acquired them. Right, and talked a little bit about it. Yeah, so that makes sense. When you look at next year, right, or this year, I guess we're already in this year. So this year, going forward, what excites you about what's happening in your space?
So right now, I've been working a lot with our engineering teams and product management around evangelizing as well as customer adoption of the Tanzu service on VMware Cloud and AWS. And so we've had a lot of excitement around that, where the big attraction to customers is customers are already in VMware Cloud and AWS. It's obvious they can just attach a service and start it up. It's included with the VMC subscription, which is nice. So customers don't have to think twice. It's like it's already there. Let's just enable it, start deploying containers, and then also working with newer customers to where this opened up a whole new use case for us. So previously, what we were focused on was data center migration, DR to the cloud, data center extension. So just having that hybrid sort of cloud story. And so what this opened up is, hey, we've got a development team that are quickly growing out of their sort of, like I said before, that homegrown Kubernetes infrastructure. And by the way, we need to do this like yesterday. And those are the customers are really excited because we can stand up an SDC in under 2 hours. So fully configured, minimum of 3 host environment where we've got NSX, vSAN, vSphere fully ready to go. All you got to do is upload a template and you're done. To the point now where within 20 minutes later, we have a fully functional Kubernetes environment on top of it with Tanzu mission control included. And so customers are just seeing that advantage and that lower total cost of ownership, but also their time to get things done. Because all of our customers now, what we're seeing too is like post-COVID. So I think during COVID there was this little sort of window where everything was sort of on hold, and now we're seeing, like, as we're coming out of it, hopefully, the pandemic, we're seeing a lot of customers are like, okay, let's get back to business as usual, but we just lost about a year or two of actual productivity. So we need to do things like tomorrow. And that's where we're seeing a lot of uptick is, hey, this service is really fast to stand up and we can have things going within a few weeks rather than months of planning and execution.
Catching up on the checklist of things you said you were going to do. I look at my goals and objectives for this year, and like they're the same goals and objectives I had last year and the year before, right? Because like a lot of these didn't get met just because we're stuck in pandemic and you can't do everything you wanted to do. So now that you can, the speed that which you want to try to accomplish some of this stuff is certainly there. That's interesting. I did want to comment also that I have a couple of friends that work at big companies, and they use cloud services, and they were all on VMC and AWS, right? But it's surprising now how many are actually stepping back trying to disconnect a little bit, right? Because they're over dependent on not VMC, sorry, AWS native,
Mhm.
right? And they're stepping back to look at like, how do I do this so that I can unlock from just being completely dependent on AWS? I want to get to Azure, but I have all these services that I'm running in different places, and I have to step back and architect a solution that allows me to get to multi-cloud, because I've got lock-in over there, and I'm not really comfortable being locked into AWS anymore for competitive reasons or performance reasons, stability reasons. They're just not. And I have like several friends of mine that are IT guys that are like now stepping back, looking at how to put stuff on Azure, right? And it's interesting that this is a real issue for people now. And I look at some of the services that have been down through AWS the last couple of months. They've had major outages, and if I'm running a big company where those outages cost me a lot of money per minute, I'm also looking at ways to have multiple vendors give me capacity so that I'm not completely down if one of them goes. But that gets into this whole list of 5 dependencies that you have to manage, because in order to have your workloads go close multi-cloud, you do have to manage these dependencies. So I smile at that my famous dependency story is Facebook. The guy unplugged one of their systems that did DNS, all their DNS resolution, and he was doing an upgrade on it, and he messed up and he brought the system down, and he walked out of the lab and went to go get his boss to say, "Oh shoot, I brought the machine, we got to fix it." And he went to go get his boss because the boss knew more, and he walked out of the lab. The card reader was dependent on the DNS service, so they couldn't get back in the lab to restart the machines, and they were out of the lab for like 5 hours because they couldn't get back in. Nobody wanted to break a window. So these cross dependencies across all the different services and tools that you're relying, including your bad reader, can bite you in places that you didn't really expect. So
yeah. It's interesting you say that about your friends at these companies with these challenges around the different hyperscalers. And it goes back to a conversation I just had with a colleague that, when I originally saw like public cloud, and someone was like, "Oh, there's this thing called Amazon." This is back in like 2008, and they're like, "Well, we're going to start running some servers there." And I was like, "Oh, cool." I'm like, "Do they run VMware?" And they're like, "No, it runs on this Zen thing." I'm like, "Well, how does that work?" Obviously, Amazon's been very successful. But what I like about what VMware is doing is this is a vision I had a long time ago too, was, hey, VMware running in all these different hyperscalers, and then you have the choice of where you want to move VMs. You have the same common architecture, the same operational design. And I think we're doing the same thing with our Tanzu portfolio. Is we're really addressing it. It's a different challenge though, because containers and developers and the way they operate, it's much different than a VM that's just going to be there forever. So a VM that's there forever, obviously we need to build in things like HA and DRS and all the great innovations VMware brought to the table. But addressing the container space and making it agnostic, I think took a different approach. And that's the message I'm trying to get across to a lot of our customers, and just the development community in general is, I think VMware really brings something unique to the table of being able to provide these tools, that, a lot of which are open source, that you can use to really take advantage of being cloud agnostic rather than being stuck in one or the other.
I meant to ask this when we got started, but I'll do it now. Thanks to everybody for listening to near the end of the podcast here. Ryan, where are you located?
I actually support the Bay Area, but I'm currently living in Lake Tahoe. So
I was gonna say, the background, the wood, it looks like you're like in a cabin in Tahoe somewhere, right? Because it does have that look. Yeah.
It just started snowing too, so it's definitely like we're the groundhog saw its shadow, I guess. Yeah. So
it's saw its shadow. We're in for another few months of who knows what, right? Like I don't think there's a normal here anymore, but that's awesome. So you're out of Tahoe. Good to have you dial in. We're coming up to the last 5 minutes to the hour, so we've been going for about 50 minutes. We do go live stream if people are listening to the podcast. They want to go look at what Ryan looks like. We do broadcast on VBarbecue. So youtube.com/VBarbecue. BARBECUE. You can go check it out, check out the episodes, and you can see what Ryan looks like if you want to see what he looks like. And look at his backdrop of his Tahoe snowy, glary window there with this super cool wood background. Got to say, looks pretty nice. All right. And you got the sweater on, so that should have been the giveaway that you're like somewhere in a colder climate, right? It's probably snowing out because you're in the snow.
Yeah.
So
we'll give you I'll give you a hint on the wall. It looks easy on HGTV, but it was not as easy to look. So
it looks like you put some time into crafting that, so that's pretty nice. We asked people at the end of the show, and we also have Tony Foster come in and talk VBarbecue here because it is coming up to lunchtime. It's 12:56 here in California. Ryan, do you ever barbecue? And if so, or do you visit a favorite barbecue place? We would just want a 1-minute barbecue story. Do you barbecue? And if so, what's your favorite barbecue?
Sure. So my sort of claim to fame or my special dish is ribs. So I love barbecuing baby back ribs. And I learned a technique from actually someone at VMware of the Dr. Pepper method. So I soak them, boil them in Dr. Pepper first for about 2 hours, get everything soft. And then I've got a dry rub and then a barbecue sauce that I make and then throw it on the grill, get the char on it. But that's my go-to.
Dr. Pepper barbecue ribs. I'm going to try that because me and my wife were just talking that Tony Roma's, as bad as people want to make fun of them, they had really wet barbecue ribs. Like they were boiled, falling off the bone, and then they just slathered it with barbecue sauce. But I happen to like those. And Tony Roma's basically gone out of business in the Bay Area because they don't make enough money to survive. I think they have one left somewhere down south. But I'm trying to figure out a wet, fall off the bone barbecue rib recipe. So Dr. Pepper barbecue ribs with a rub up to 2 hours and then put them on the grill. Char them up.
And it looks like it's totally not going to work. So you have to have some patience and some faith, but they are just so juicy and fall off the bone good. You won't want to make it any way else from there.
All right. I'm going to put that on my list. That's what I'm going to try. Dr. Pepper. Tony Foster, you're around. I know you're listening. Anything interesting from your perspective, or are we good to go?
All I did was barbecued pork burgers yesterday. They were absolutely fantastic. They don't sound like they hold a candle in the wind to the Dr. Pepper ribs.
So a barbecue pork, you just take pork and hamburgers and you just, get ground pork, I assume, and barbecue them up?
Yes. And living in the Midwest, we have lots of great food. So these actually came from K-State University, from one of the meat sciences departments. And take them out, they're pre-made patties, and cook them over the flame about 3 minutes each side so that they're cooked through. And they're just absolutely phenomenal.
And is K-State Kansas State?
Yes, it is.
There you go. From the meat department of Kansas State, ground pork burgers here on the VBarbecue channel with Ryan Kelly and Tony Foster. Awesome. Well, Ryan, are you on Twitter? And then we'll do a goodbye here. So if people want to follow you, are you on Twitter?
Yeah, it's at VM to Cloud. So the same as the website.
All right, VM to Cloud. There you go. Go check out his site, VM to Cloud, and say hello to Ryan Kelly on VM to Cloud on Twitter at VM to Cloud. Awesome, Ryan. Thanks a lot for spending a lunch hour with us and the community. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody.